My name is Elise, age 30, and this is my story of betrayal by my husband and my best friend. My husband, Reed, age 35, and I have been married for 5 years and dated for 2 years before marriage. We deliberately waited until we were settled to have children. We own our own home, cars, and have well-paying jobs. I make a lot more money than Reed, and he does not like this too much, but enjoys the benefits. I had also inherited money from my grandparents, the total amount I have not told Reed. I have been saving the money for our future children, as Reed is a big spender. I just didn't tell him. I am a publisher at a well-known fashion magazine, and he sells homeowners insurance. At the time of my story, I was 7.5 months pregnant with identical twins. When I stopped birth control, we got pregnant almost immediately. We were both very happy, or so I thought. My best friend, since middle school, Stella, is not married and plays the field with many men. She likes to say she is not going to be tied down with one man. I love Stella and trusted her, which was my mistake because I did not realize her true nature. I trusted my husband and would have never suspected anything, except I had updated the security cameras before our babies were born. I had started worrying about needing extra security as my pregnancy advanced. Since I own the building, we live in the penthouse, and I rent out the lower apartments. It was an easy update. Most of the cameras were old and didn't work anyway. Living in New York City, I felt the need for added security, knowing my husband would object to me spending so much. I just hadn't told him yet. It's okay if he spends lots of money, but he complains if I do, even though it's my earnings I'm spending. After the cameras were installed, I pulled up the app on my phone to check them out. To my surprise, I saw Reed and Stella get off the elevator in our home together, holding hands. I watched them go into our bedroom, undressing, and watched as they had sex on my bed. Well, I didn't really watch, as it made me sick, but I did see what they intended to do. When they moved into the living room, without clothes, and started on our couch, I shut it off immediately. I was heartbroken and furious, but took a deep breath as I did not want to upset my babies, and I was in my office. Normally, the first person I would call is Stella, but that was not an option. So, I phoned my attorney and asked for the name of the best divorce lawyer in town. After getting the name, Lucy Luckett, which I thought was the greatest name ever for a divorce lawyer, I called for an appointment. She could not see me until the next day, so I finished my workday as usual, not that I got a lot done, and went home. I was still furious but determined to make them pay for their betrayal. And no one was at home when I got there, and as I walked around my bedroom, I knew I could not sleep in that bed tonight. I phoned building maintenance and had the mattress, bedding, and the couch removed and thrown in the garbage. When I was asked about throwing it away, I just told them the things smelled bad. Since I was pregnant, they just acted like it was a pregnant woman quirk. I went online and ordered a new king-size mattress, bedding, and couch to be delivered as soon as possible. It wasn't long before Reed came home, and guess who showed up? With him, of course, Miss Slut Stella. Reed said, "Look who I found coming off the street. We can have dinner together." I said, "Go ahead and order something in tonight. I don't feel like cooking or eating. I am having a little nausea today." When Reed tried to hug me, I leaned away saying, "Oops, no hugs." Still queasy, Stella looked around and said, "Where's your furniture?" I told them that I had maintenance haul it and the mattress out, because when I got home it smelled like a prostitute with multiple STDs had been in here. The stench was terrible and almost rotten. I guess we must have had smog today that came through the windows or something. The look on Stella's face was priceless, and Reed looked kind of sick to his stomach. I loved it, and kept on talking about the smell, until Stella said she couldn't stay for a meal and needed to leave. After she left, I told Reed I shouldn't have talked like that in front of Stella, since she has had so many sexual partners. I also mentioned that she had to be treated for an STD a couple of times in the last few years, even having to have a hysterectomy, which is the truth. After I told him this, he really did look sick. I had a snack of crackers, cheese, and milk, and went to bed in the smallest guest room that only had a twin bed. When I told him good night, I didn't touch him, as I felt nauseated. Reed had to sleep in the other guest room. The next day I met with, as I call her, Lucy, the lucky divorce attorney. After I showed her what the security cameras recorded, she asked a few questions. She told me that New York is a non-communal state, and I will not have to share 50/50 with Reed. He keeps what he makes and owns, and I keep mine. I hired her on the spot and asked her to proceed, as I would like to be divorced before the birth of my children, or at least be in the process. She asks me if I am going to kick Reed out now, or wait until he has served notice. When I told her about throwing away the things they had sex on, where I slept last night, and how I explained throwing away the furniture, she laughed. She told me, good for you. Just be careful since you are pregnant, and she will call me before she has him served. Now I had been thinking how I could get back at my so-called best friend, Stella. She works as a photographer in a small office, taking photos of children and families. She rents the first floor in a 3-story building, and I think it's time for me to purchase another building. When I got back to my office, I spent a little time editing the security recording by blurring the things I did not want to see, but left enough to know what they were doing to send to Reed's boss and Stella's employees later. I phoned Stella and made an appointment to pick her up for lunch, as I already knew her co-workers and wanted them to see me pregnant. I had not been there in a while, so I wanted to visit and gush about my great marriage and husband. I was feeling a little evil, but when I thought about what they were doing behind my back, I got over it quickly. I went early to her office. I talked with the receptionist for a long time before Stella finished with her photo session. I showed pictures of our nursery, the ultrasound photos, and told her the different names we were thinking of choosing. I told her and the part-time photographer that worked with her how excited my husband was about the birth of our twins and finding out the sex, since they are identical. I watched Stella's facial expressions when she joined us, and she was not happy. I made a big production of telling them Stella and I had been friends since the age of 14 in middle school. There was lots of oohing and ahs over the photos, and our friendship for that long. At our lunch, which I had a hard time eating, I kept up the gushing about everything until Stella had to suddenly leave. I was able to enjoy the rest of my lunch after she left. When I watched the security camera later at work, I discovered that Reed and Stella met up at our home again but had no sex this time. Thank goodness our furniture was not delivered yet. I had phoned Reed earlier to tell him that I had asked our maid to start working more as of today, and not sure what time she was coming. That way, if they met up there, they would not have time to do anything. While I watched, I was shocked to hear Stella tell Reed that once the babies were born, she would volunteer to babysit one day while I ran errands. She told Reed he could cut my brake lines, then after I died, they could raise the twins as theirs, as she cannot have children. He was smiling and laughing. I was beyond furious, and immediately phoned my attorney and sent the recording to her computer. Lucy said, "Okay, this is bad, and we need to act quickly now for your safety. I will have Reed serve the divorce papers as soon as possible. You call and have a locksmith come change all the locks. I am also going to share this recording with the police, as what they are planning is illegal and murder. We will get a restraining order against both of them. Do you have a relative that could come stay with you? We will hire a driver for security too. I am worried about you, but you should be safe until after the children are born." I told her I would start working on things right away. I wasn't sure if my mom would come stay with me or not. She and my dad do not like Reed and have avoided us since our wedding 5 years ago. On the rare occasions we saw each other, it was very awkward. Since they live in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, They probably would not want to come to New York City. Okay, I will call and explain what is going on because I am worried about my babies. I called my mom and she answered on the first ring. She started by asking, "Is everything okay?" I was shocked at myself because I burst into tears. I think the stress of finding out my husband and best friend are cheaters and want to murder me caused me to finally break. When I calmed down, after scaring my mom to death, I started at the beginning and explained everything to both of my parents. As my dad got on the phone too, she said, "Don't worry, your dad and I will be there by day after tomorrow. We just have to find someone to take care of our dog and make flight arrangements." I told her, "Please just bring Iggy with you. He is a small 12-pound Maltese mixed rescue puppy, about 4 years old. He would be great company for me, and since I own the building, who could object?" I was so shocked that my parents had not told me "I told you so," but they didn't and seemed excited to come help me. They asked if I had told my older brother, and when I said no, they said they would wait on me to tell him about Reed and the divorce. That surprised me because I thought they would jump at the chance to tell Todd and his wife Molly all about my failure. Maybe they really do love me. When Reed came home from work, he told me that he would be leaving town for a few days on business. I asked when he was leaving, and he told me tomorrow afternoon and will be gone for 3 days. I thought to myself, good, I can have the rest of your things packed up. My parents can come get settled. The locks will be changed, and best of all, his boss will receive an email video of him and Stella. Things were falling into place, and I will call my attorney tomorrow with this news. Later in the evening, I received a call from my so-called best friend Stella, telling me she couldn't meet up for our every other week coffee date. She is going out of town for a couple of days for a photo shoot. I told her to have a good trip and be careful that she didn't hook up with any married men. Then I laughed when she told me she doesn't hook up with married men. She isn't that kind of person. Surprisingly, she did not hear me eye roll. The next morning, I phoned my OBMD office and requested an appointment. They were concerned because I had just been there 2 weeks before and not due to be seen for 2 more weeks. The appointment was made for the next morning. After I reassured them it was not an emergency and I just needed to talk with my doctor, I didn't tell the receptionist, but I have a concern about getting an STD from my cheating husband. This is a talk to be held in private. I phoned Lucy, my attorney, and gave her an update on Reed and Stella both leaving town. She said, "Don't worry, my private detective is following them," and he reported they left town together. I also reported to my police detective friend, sending him the recording. He is working on the restraining orders for both Reed and Stella. I was hoping it wasn't true, but in my heart, I knew they left together. After finishing some work business, I met with my realtor and personal attorney. We signed the papers, and I was now the owner of the building where Stella had her business. I had them draft a letter telling the tenants that they had a new landlord. We used a business title as the name of the landlord. I had them reduce the rent for the rest of the building but doubled the rent for Stella. I know it was mean, but I do not feel any sympathy for her, and I have a plan to help her employees when she goes out of business. I also asked them to check into the building that Stella has her apartment. I might just buy it to Dot in the afternoon. I drove to Port Washington, NY, where my in-laws live. It is about an hour out of the city in Long Island. They used to live in the Bronx until retirement. I helped them behind the scenes to buy their home. They do not know, but the payments they are making are going into a savings account. I didn't even tell Reed, as I knew he would tell them. They are very proud people and will be upset at first when I tell them. They are the grandparents to my children, and I have always loved and admired them. I am going to tell them everything today because I want them to be in my children's lives, and I don't trust Reed to tell them the truth. When I arrived, they were outside sitting in the shade having tea. After our greetings and them scolding me for not calling first and driving so far by myself, I started at the beginning After I told them how much I love them and wanted them to be part of my children and my life, I began my story. I showed them the cleaned up version of the videos and they were stunned at what they saw and heard. They were devastated by the video of the plan to kill me. We held each other while we all cried. I told them that Reed and Stella were out of town together now, and I was hoping to have everything in place except final divorce proceeding before they returned. They said they were so ashamed and shocked at what their son is doing. I reassured them that they would still be my family and I wanted them to see my children as often as they wanted. Reed's mom Amy asks if Reed will get to see his children. I told her yes, he will be part of their lives, and my attorney had explained to me what will happen. The thing is that because of the threats to my life and plan to take the children, it will be supervised visitation only. The court will appoint a guardian to be with the children at each visit. I can observe from a distance, but because of the threat, a restraining order will be put in place. After a few minutes of silence, I told them I had a confession to make and handed them the deed to their property and a bank book. They looked at me in confusion. As I told them what I had done, they were stunned as they listened to me. I explained to them that I wanted to confess now, as I didn't know how Reed will react to them being in touch with me. I knew it would be okay for contact with the children, but he might object to me. I thank them for taking the place of my parents for the last 5 years and for loving me. I do not want to be the cause of any problems with them or their son, or their family. I told them I loved them and always would. I promised to never say a negative word against them, their son, or any of their family to my children. I asked them to please not mention about the deed or savings as I was afraid it would make for resentment and accusations with their family when the divorce is made known. If okay with them, please just accept as a gift of love and forget where it came from. Enjoy their home, travel, and relax in retirement. After a few more tears and hugs, I left to go home and meet the locksmith. Then it would be time to pack up my husband's belongings. I will confess I did cry as I packed his things. I wanted to take them to the dumpster or even set them on fire, but I didn't, mainly out of respect for his parents. I carefully folded everything and wrapped any breakable items carefully. I then called building maintenance to take everything to the storage area on first floor. I made up my new bed, as it had just been delivered when I finished packing. I called building security, having them come up, and told them that Reed was not to be allowed in my apartment per court order. Also, requested that Stella not be allowed up anymore. They were understanding when I requested extra security be available until further notice. I had a snack, then lay down on my new bed and cried for a while until I went to sleep. I went to my OB appointment when morning came and cried again when I asked her to please check me for any STDs. She was very reassuring and reminded me my initial testing at beginning of pregnancy was all negative, but she was happy to order them again. She made me an appointment with a counselor in her office whose specialty is pregnant women. She wanted me to discuss everything that was happening, as now was definitely a bad time for me to be extra stressed. After blood was drawn and specimens were taken, I went and talked with the counselor. She was horrified with what I was going through at this stage of pregnancy. She taught me some mediation exercises and breathing techniques to try when things got overwhelming. She was such a calm, soothing person that I made another appointment for 2 days later. Now I just had to wait. The next morning my parents arrived, earlier than I was expecting, but I was so happy to see them. After hugs and some more tears, I sat down on my new couch. Their dog jumped up beside me, then leaned up and licked the tears off my face. He sat as close as he could in my lap, and when a baby kicked him, he licked my stomach. He was so cute and had me laughing. Our maid, Sally, was with me this morning. Usually she only came in twice a week, but I had asked her to come in more often. She was pleased to be able to work more. She was going to come in 4 mornings a week now and help until the babies come, then maybe more often. She brought us all hot tea and coffee, then left to do some laundry. My parents wanted me to go over everything again, even though I had explained over the phone. When I showed them the cleaned up version of the first recording, my dad was so mad we had to calm him down. Then both my parents were furious when they heard and saw the recording about trying to kill me. My mom said, "What is wrong with Stella? We practically raised her, and we even paid for her college. Why would she do this to you?" I told my parents I did not know, that I had always thought I was good to her and treated her like my sister. I had even tried to think of any reason she would do this, and I could not think of anything. I have a great attorney that is gathering all the evidence and helping me. I told them Reed and Stella were due back from their trip tomorrow and would be served at the airport. Divorce papers for Reed and a subpoena for Stella. My attorney recommends suing Stella for alienation of affection, and the police are investigating charging both for premeditation and conspiracy for planning to kill me. Stella will have to show up for court when our divorce is finalized. The locks have been changed and all of Reed's belongings are packed and moved to storage on first floor. He has no reason to come here, and security knows to keep he and Stella out. I told them about going to see Reed's parents and what I had done about their home. Both of my parents were teary-eyed as they told me they were proud of me for doing that for Reed's parents. Later that evening, I received a call from Stella. I answered out of curiosity. She had opened her emails and received a notice that her landlord had changed. She was shocked that her rent had doubled, and she wanted to borrow money from me. She had done this numerous times in the past, and I had always agreed. This time I told her I didn't have any extra money now, as I had opened a trust account for my babies. She tried begging me, even saying I know Reed wouldn't care if you helped me out for a couple of months. I held firm and she hung up mad at me, but I didn't care if she lost everything. She and Reed had used me for the last time. The next day, Reed and Stella were walking through the airport holding hands after their trip to Las Vegas. They were laughing about the fact that Elise would never know about them and how smart they have been. A man walked up to them and said, "Reed Martin and Stella Jones." They looked at each other first before replying, "Yes." The man handed them envelopes and said, "You have been served. Have a good day." He then turned and walked away. They both opened the envelopes and saw that Reed had been served with divorce papers, and Stella had been subpoenaed as a witness for adultery. Reed immediately pulled out his phone to call Elise. When she answered, he asked her what is going on. "Why have you filed for divorce?" She told him to look straight ahead. He looked and saw Elise and her dad standing right in front of he and Stella. Elise had her camera out recording. Stella ran over and tried to hug Elise and her dad, saying, "I just ran into Reed here at the airport. Are you here to meet Reed?" Elise's dad stepped forward and wouldn't let Reed or Stella near either himself or Elise. Reed said, "Elise, what is going on now?" About that time, two deputy sheriff officers walked up and called Reed and Stella's names. They were placed in handcuffs and arrested for criminal conspiracy and premeditation of murder. Reed looked at Elise saying, "This is not over. I don't know what is wrong with you, but you will regret doing this to me." Stella just looked angrily at Elise and said, "I want an attorney." They were taken to the police station, and Elise and her dad went home. Elise's attorney Lucy was at the police station when the cheating couple were brought to jail. She had filed all the papers and given copies of the recordings to the detectives in charge. Stella and Reed were taken into different interrogation rooms to be questioned. Reed tried to say he didn't know what was going on, that maybe his wife who is pregnant is going crazy. He kept denying having an affair or threatening to kill his wife. Stella didn't say a word until her attorney got there. When he did, she denied everything also. After the detective showed Reed, Stella, and her attorney the threatening recording, they both said they were just joking. Reed said, "I would never leave my wife. We are having twins soon." They stayed in jail overnight until They went before a judge the next morning. They pleaded not guilty and were each bonded out with a $500,000 bond. A restraining order was in place to not go anywhere near Elise. Reed and Stella were furious, especially when they found out they were on all the local news stations and in the newspapers. They could not figure out how Elise had found out and how she got recordings of them. They went their separate ways as their attorneys advised them to keep a distance between them until the court date. Reed went to the apartment building but was not allowed inside. Security officers brought him his suitcases and boxes of belongings. The only place he could go stay was his parents' home. First, he went to his office and noticed that none of his fellow employees were speaking to him. He went to his boss and his boss informed him that he was fired because no one felt safe to work with him again. He left then to go to his parents. Stella went to work where she found the office locked and her receptionist and part-time photographer were not there. When she called them, they told her that they both had quit and had found jobs elsewhere. They didn't tell her that Elise had found them both wonderful jobs with a famous photographer for a lot more money and they had started immediately. Stella discovered that her receptionist had sent the videos to all her clients, and all appointments had been canceled. No families wanted a mistress who plotted murder to take pictures of their families. When she tried to phone Reed, he refused to answer her calls. When he arrived at his parents' home, he was surprised to see his brother and sister's cars in the drive. He walked in and his sister walked over and slapped his face. His parents and brother just looked at him without speaking. He said, "What's wrong with you? Why did you slap me?" His sister said, "You've been sleeping with that slut and planning to murder your wife. What's wrong with you?" Everyone knows Stella has slept with hundreds of guys and has been treated for STDs and you went there? His parents were shocked to hear about Stella and the STDs, saying to Reed, "Do you know you have ruined your life?" Reed tried to tell them it was all false and blame everything on Elise, but his family wouldn't have it, telling him they are ashamed of his actions. He asks if he could stay there for a while because he has lost his job and Elise won't let him into his apartment. He knew it would be short term as Elise will get over this craziness soon and he can go back home. They told him he could stay, but it won't be short term as Elise will never forgive him. His older brother just shook his head in disgust and left. His dad took him aside and said, "You do know that Elise does not have to give you anything of hers as New York is not a 50-50, it's communal state. So, whatever is hers and whatever you went into the marriage with is all you get. So don't say your apartment. As we know, Elise paid for everything." Reed was shocked as he had bragged to Stella that he would get at least half of everything if he ever divorced, and that included however much Elise got in inheritance. Even though he never could get Elise to tell him the exact amount, as she planned to put most of it in a trust for their children. She had never told Stella either. The only ones that knew the amount of her inheritance were her parents. She always told him he would try to spend it if he knew. Elise was very happy to get a call from her OB the next day, telling her all tests were negative and she had no STDs. She doesn't know how long the cheaters have been together, but maybe at least Reed wore a condom at the beginning. She is so far into her pregnancy that thankfully she and Reed have not been sexually active lately. Reed and Stella were to appear in court the week of the beginning of Elise's 8th month of pregnancy. Elise had been summoned to testify by the prosecution. She, her parents, Reed's parents, and his brother and sister all sat together in the courtroom. Stella's mother and younger brother sat across from them. They had both greeted Elise and her family with hugs. The judge called the proceedings to order, and the prosecution started his summary. He stated all the facts, including that there were recordings. The two defending attorneys both repeated the same things, that their clients did not know what this procedure was even about, and they felt like the pregnant wife was blowing things out of proportion. Elise was the first witness called. She answered why she had updated the security cameras, And did she suspect that her husband was cheating? She replied as accurately as she could, and that she was stunned and heartbroken that her husband was cheating. When the defense objected, the prosecution showed the full video without any blurring of Reed and Stella having sex. At this point, there was no doubt that there was cheating going on according to the video. When the defense attorney for Stella started asking questions, he was very rude and said that Elise had always been jealous of Stella's free lifestyle and that the babies were not even Reed's. The whole courtroom erupted at that, and even Reed stood up saying that's not true. When the judge finally got order in the courtroom, Elise looked over at Stella saying, "I have never been jealous of her lifestyle. I was a virgin when we married and have only ever slept with one person, my husband. In fact, her lifestyle always made me sick, and I thought my husband felt the same way, but obviously not." The defense attorney said no more questions, and Reed's attorney was afraid to ask anything as everyone could tell Elise was telling the truth. The prosecution showed the video of Reed and Stella discussing cutting the brake lines and killing Elise. Then he rests his case. When the defense presented their case, Stella took the stand first and she showed off. She was wearing a micro mini skirt and no underwear. She crossed her legs and the whole room was disgusted. As her attorney asked questions, she kept saying she was innocent, that she would never do anything like that to her friend of over 15 years, and Elise was just crazy. When the prosecution started asking questions, she still acted like she was so innocent. Elise had warned him that she liked to brag, so he asks her if she was jealous of Elise because she was a virgin, then married, and now pregnant. Stella laughed, saying, "Why should I be jealous of that old stick in the mud? I've slept with hundreds of guys, and I know how to treat a man." She didn't know how to please Reed, but I did. He couldn't get enough of me, and I was hoping he would take HIV back to her and ruin her life. The whole courtroom gasped when she said that, and the attorney asked her if she is HIV positive, and she laughed again. Her attorney was frantically trying to get her attention and objecting. When the judge said, No, I want her to answer the question. "Are you HIV positive?" She looked scared but said, "Yes, I am." The judge said, "Did you have protected sex with Mr. Martin?" She replied, "We did at the beginning, but not lately." Judge asking, "Did you tell Mr. Martin that you are HIV positive?" Stella replied very quietly, "No." Reed looked positively sick, and his family just hung their heads. Elise was quietly crying with her parents, one on each side of her, holding her hand. The defense rested their case at that point, with Reed not even taking the stand. He sat beside his attorney with his head down. The judge closed court for today and requested the defendants return the next day at 9 o'clock a.m. for sentencing. As Elise and her parents left the courtroom, Reed's parents and his siblings hugged her and wished her well. Elise whispered to his mom that she would call them when she started labor, so they could come meet their grandchildren. Reed called her name but could not get close as law enforcement blocked him because of the restraining order. Stella ran up and grabbed Reed's arm, but he brushed her off, saying, "Stay away from me." The next morning, everyone was back in the courtroom. Reed's parents had driven him into town. They were afraid he would be going to jail and did not want an extra car in town. Elise's parents rode over with her driver. The judge called court into session. She had the defendants stand and begin the sentencing. First, she spoke to Reed and explained that since reviewing the recordings again, he was not the one planning to hurt his wife. He had just nodded and agreed. Because of his prejudgment of becoming involved with Miss Jones, he will be sentenced to 2 years of probation. She strongly advised that he have a medical follow-up immediately as he has been exposed to the HIV virus. She also advised him that a permanent restraining order will be put in place to stay away from Mrs. Martin. He can have supervised only visitation with his children, as will be agreed on during the divorce proceedings. The judge told him he may be seated. The judge turned to Stella and told her that she will be sentenced to 3 years in prison starting immediately for trying to plan a murder and steal Mrs. Martin's children. Also, for knowingly exposing Mr. Martin and others to known STDs. You will provide a list of the men that you have had sexual contact with to the health department. You will undergo a complete physical and psychological exam and be tested for STDs. Stella started yelling, "Why do I have to go to jail? And he doesn't. It's not fair. He wanted to get rid of his wife as much as I did. It's just not fair." The judge had Stella physically removed from the courtroom and, after calling for order, spoke directly to Elise, who was crying quietly. She told her that she was so sorry that Elise had to go through all of this and hopes that she has a safe delivery of healthy twins. Elise left with her family after speaking to Reed's parents and siblings. There was lots of tears and hugs. Elise again promised to call when her labor starts. Stella's mother and brother both spoke with Elise and told her they were so sorry for what Stella had done to break up her family. Elise tearfully told them that she hopes Stella gets help, but she would never be her friend again. The next couple of weeks are rough for Elise. She was so sad and heartbroken. Her brother Todd and his wife Molly came to visit. They hugged her and never once even mentioned Reed to her. Elise did overhear Todd and their dad talking one morning how if they ever ran into Reed, he would get a beating. At 8.5 months pregnant, Elise's water broke. Her parents and her driver took her to the hospital. On the way, she had her mom phone Reed's parents to let them know she was in labor. She was so sad that the father of her children was not with her, but glad he wasn't there pretending to be faithful. Her mom and sister-in-law were her birth coaches. Molly whispered to Elise that in 6 months she could be her birth coach with Todd. Elise was excited to hear she was going to have a niece or nephew to grow up with her children. After several hours, Elise gave birth to beautiful baby girls. On February 22, 2022, her mom cried and said they looked just like Elise did at birth. They weighed 5 pounds 6 ounces each and were 18 inches long. They were born 3 minutes apart. They were adorable with light-colored hair. Elise named her babies Everly Rose and Elena Rose. Elise named her girls after herself as her middle name is Rose. The whole family were thrilled. Reed's parents and brother and sister and their families came to the hospital. They all hugged Elise and held the babies. Everyone said they looked just like Elise. Reed's parole officer allowed Reed to go to the hospital with officers escorting him. He was only allowed to see the babies through the nursery windows. His parents stood with him as he cried. He knew he had messed up his life because he couldn't keep his pants zipped. Now he is divorced, jobless, homeless except for his parents, and HIV positive. He is now on medication so that maybe in 8 to 10 years he won't develop AIDS. Reed wrote a letter to Elise apologizing for everything he had done and telling her how beautiful their girls are. He tried to tell Elise he still loved her and hoped she would forgive him and get back together with him. Elise cried when she received the letter but knew there was no going back. She felt like Reed and Stella were just using her all these years. Stella had never been her friend, and that hurt almost more than the betrayal of her husband. Elise loved her time at home with her children, so she began working from home editing for her magazine. When her babies were 6 weeks old, her parents went home. Reed's parents visited often and were upset that Reed had only visited with his children once other than the hospital. He had decided it was too much trouble visiting at the Child Protection Center, so he refused to go. The divorce was finalized with Reed getting nothing from Elise, even though he pitched a fit in the courtroom and had to spend the night in jail. The divorce judge told him that since he was the one in the wrong, he had no right to act up in his courtroom. Elise and her attorney Lucy became friends and she visited often. In fact, Elise and Stella's receptionist and part-time photographer kept in touch with Elise and her little family. When Elise's beautiful girls, that looked just like her, were 5 years old, Her parents introduced her to a wonderful man in their hometown. It took a year before Elise began to trust him, as she had trust issues after Reed. About 3 years from meeting, they were married in a beautiful ceremony on the beach. Elena and Everly loved Eric and called him Dad right away. Reed's family came to Maine for the wedding. Reed had moved across country to California years before and remarried. He now had 2 stepchildren and was still just HIV positive. He did not want to see his girls, but Elise had taken the girls to her counselor, and they were doing okay without Reed. They had lots of love from their grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Now they had a new dad. Elise and Eric had 2 children, a boy and a girl that Elena and Everly loved dearly. They insisted that their parents name their sister Emma Rose and their brother Ethan Ross. Eric had adopted the girls at their insistence, and now they all had the same last name, Anderson. Elise and her girls had moved to Maine after the wedding, and they were all very happy. Stella phoned Elise after getting out of prison, and even though the restraining order is still in place, Elise answered the phone. She was curious to see what Stella would say to her. Stella wanted money from Elise, as she said it was Elise's fault that she was in so much trouble and went to prison. Elise just listened in shock at Stella's entitled attitude. She hung up. When Stella said, "You owe me," Stella tried to sue Elise, but the attorney she went to laughed and told her she did not have any sort of case. He said if she pursued this line of thinking she could wind up back in jail. Stella did not have any friends, and last that was known of her, she was working in a bar. She had slept with over 100 men in a 6-month period. The HIV positive results became known after the health department phoned all the men she knew the names of, and since she couldn't remember a lot of their names, her information had to be published to find all the men she had exposed. She had no more dates after that. This just shows that it does not pay to cheat, because karma always finds you.